he had a lot of his own ideas, and he was just like, Freud, who's he?
He does. He was credited with getting rid of mechanical restraints, the use of lobotomies, which at the time were very popular, and employing daily meetings with staff to discuss the patient's well-being, as well as prevention of violence between the patients and the nurses and the patients. He also prioritized safety and instituted a regimen of occupational therapy with the hospital, as well as increasing the staff to take care of anyone that was in their stead. This is, of course, before his new theory started to develop in 1913. The confirmation that spirochetes, a group of spiral-shaped bacteria, often linked to Lyme disease and syphilis, could also cause psychiatric symptoms, propelled his ideas into action.
Okay, all right.
After this had come out in medical transcripts, Cotton had begun to suspect that all mental illness was probably caused by bodily infection and that there was only one cure.
Antibiotics.
To remove the offending organ or organs with the use of surgical bacteriology, obviously. It's not cowbell this time.
Okay. All right.
Due to this idea, in 1917, he started using surgery as the only treatment of psychological maladies. He started with their teeth, and at that time, he thought that it was the most obvious area of infection.
Why? Because it was close to the brain, or what?
Not clear. I feel like that might be what he thought, honestly, is that the bacterium that may happen in your mouth could transfer somehow to your brainstem, but I'm not him, and I can't ask him.
It's ridiculous.
The doctors on staff, including Cotton, would target unerupted and impacted teeth with infected roots or abscesses, decayed or carious teeth with periodontitis, poorly filled teeth, scleric teeth, and teeth with crowns, assuming that the infection would spread to the patient and affect their mental state.
Oh, so basically anybody was fucked.
Yeah.
Unless you have, like, absolutely 100% perfect teeth.
No.
You just fucked.
You just fucked, because he didn't stop at perfect teeth either.
Well, because why would you? We're on a roll. There's so much medical science behind it.
As a test, the patient's teeth would be surgically removed, sometimes as a preventative measure without the teeth actually having an issue previously, according to x-rays taken at the time. So even if you had nothing wrong with your teeth, there were no cavities, there was nothing, there was no infection, he thought there may be something lurking underneath the healthy portions because you were developing psychological issues.
This is stupid.
Uh-huh.
It's stupid. So, I think it's because, maybe people that have this wrong with their teeth or that wrong with their teeth, and here's this reason, but nope, there's nothing wrong with your teeth, so we're just going to start pulling away.
There is more.
Of course there is.
If the patient's infection didn't dissolve after the teeth were taken out, Cotton would continue to treat the patient by seeking out the new cause or hidden infection. The tonsils and the sinuses soon joined the cause of infection, followed shortly by other organs. He paid a lot of attention to the hindgut, which is, quote, the region of the gut tube laying between a point approximately 2/3 of the way along the length and transverse colon to the upper half of the anal canal. This basically meant that the lower portion of the small intestine was harboring some sort of bacterium that was causing psychosis in some way.
It's a weird thing to focus on. Now, and because that's horrifying, but when he would remove people's teeth, was he removing all of them? Or
yes.
Was he all of them? So you wouldn't have any teeth?
None.
Oh my God.
Mm-hmm. More to come.
Okay.
He believed that there was an area that hid the infection and started to remove some of the tracts in the colon, large pieces of the stomach, testicles, gallbladders, ovaries, uteruses, and spleens. If the patients, quote, refused to recover.
Oh, that phrasing.
He doubled down with the removal of fingers, eventually graduating to partially amputating limbs to alleviate the supposed infection and cure the patient's psychosis.
This is the stupidest shit I've heard in a long time.
I mean, I'd like to justify it with the time period, but also what?
No, especially like the part of your digestive tract and everything. It's like, no, honey, maybe nothing's wrong with them. Maybe they just had Chipotle for dinner.
Oh my gosh.
They're not doing so good.
It was not uncommon to see patients without ears, fingers, teeth, and sometimes all 4 limbs within the hospital.
Is that who that character was based off of?
No.
Oh, okay. I'm just curious. Because I was thinking of Chloe Sevigny.
I know. I looked it up. That's another person.
Okay.
Most had not shown any sign of infection prior to any of the surgeries. Each year, near 1,000 of so-called infected organs were removed to cure the patient. What is important to note at this time is that the use of antibiotics, antiseptic, and even anesthesia was not in practice.
So everyone's getting infected.
Yep. Patients would often develop more infections after the surgery.
Gangrene?
Just a number of other infections.
Okay, I was just curious.
It's not specific. And most had felt the surgery as it was happening. Those who hadn't died from complications of losing portions of their bodies often died later from infection. But he was undeterred. He believed that the surgeries were a miracle cure and the psychosis would return to a mental stability after the infections were found. So he's basically playing Operation badly. He's hitting all the sides. Cotton started reporting an 85 and, in some sources, 90% success rate and a massive savings to the state's treasury through his treatments. He wrote several papers and had spoken at summits in colleges with other medical professionals, and his practice and his surgical theories were held in high regard. Among his honors in institutions throughout the United States and Europe, the New York Times had even reported, quote, at the State Hospital at Trenton, New Jersey, under the brilliant leadership of the medical director, Dr. Henry A. Cotton, there is on foot the most searching, aggressive, and profound scientific investigation that has yet been made of the whole field of mental and nervous disorders. There is hope, high hope, for the future.
Oh my God.
As news of the miracles he was performing spread, desperate families with afflicted relatives or friends, especially the affluent members, started to seek out anything that may help return their loved ones to a more stable mental state. The surgeries had gained so much momentum that those unable to be attended by Cotton asked their doctors to mimic his ideology. So it wasn't just happening at Trenton, it was happening everywhere because it was a miracle.
Yeah. Well, and people were adopting this practice.
Correct. As the hospital gained popularity, the patient count swelled past capacity, and those willing to pay a premium for his treatments were pushed to the front of the line. Enter Margaret Fisher. Margaret Fisher, while 20 and working as an unpaid office assistant for her father, had seemingly started developing symptoms that were only noticed in hindsight. So she was a bit off, but her family was like, well, this is fine, until later when her nervous disorders kind of came to a head.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
In April 1918, she became engaged, and her father had urged the couple to marry as soon as possible. Soon her family had reported that she, quote, began to babble queer things about the portions and was afraid her fiancé would not come back from the war. I looked up her fiancé, and I'm not clear if he was ever in a war. Not sure. And I read portions of a book for this. Huzzah for me. She soon had started talking about, quote, God, Christ, and immortality, and her condition continued to get worse until her family, finding her basically uncontrollable, had committed her to the Bloomingdale Asylum. She spent less than a month there until her father, who was economist and Yale professor Irving Fisher, had brought her to Trenton, and she was admitted as one of the first private patients on June 27th. Things to know about him, besides the fact that he apparently was great at economist things. He was great.
Economying?
Yeah, apparently I had so many different quotes on him, and I was like, we need to skip past this because it's really aggressive. Mm-hmm. So Irving had embraced prohibition, eugenics, dietary reform, fine. Eugenics, what? The extension of the human lifespan. Okay, fine.
Okay.
But
those first
hyper-focus on eugenics.
Let's talk about those first two. Yep.
He was super close with John Harvey Kellogg, who's clearly of the Battle Creek Sanitarium and the cereal fame, where he...
I thought you were going to say of the Kellogg's, like the cereal.
Well, he is.
Okay.
That's where those came from.
Oh, good. I feel better now.
He's a fucking crazy person.
Okay. Special K.
Yeah. But for real, though, Special K. He and his family had adopted a wellness lifestyle based on Kellogg's teachings, which are not great. They're just not good. Cotton Stones had reported that she seemed normal neurologically, and although others had reported that she was, quote, pensive and preoccupied with bouts of depression, he found that the source of everything was, quote, evidence of a marked retention of fecal matter in the colon with marked enlargement of the colon in this area.
Shut up. You're dumb.
They weren't effectively using x-rays at the time, and he thought it was hidden. Additionally, they were not using anesthesia. He had diagnosed her with pure colon bacillus, which is just like an infection. Targeted first were the 2 unerupted molars, which were extracted. Unfortunately, because of her, quote, resistance, the x-rays weren't able to be taken, and exploratory laparotomy, which is the surgical opening of the abdomen to look at the organs, was commissioned. It had confirmed Cotton's theory. Her long history of constipation and psychological maladies were possibly because her, quote, cervix was eroded. Luckily for her, her parents had been unswayed and had expressed that they had preferred any sort of different treatment that wasn't surgical.
Mm-hmm. Even though they already cut her open and started looking around?
Although they finally had given in and allowed a section of her cervix to be removed.
A section of it?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Do they do that?
They did it then. This is from a book.
Okay, I don't know anything about medicine, and I wish I knew more.
Unluckily, she was given an anti-streptococcus serum that had maybe been ill-prepared.
I know what that is.
Yes, you do. Because that's strep throat normally.
And I think the name is funny because, like, if you go down on somebody when you have strep throat, they can get streptococcus in their coccus.
Gross, 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 gross.
Or their lady bits.
Gross. It may have been ill-prepared. A lot of people that have been looking at this case in later years had said that maybe all of the actual virus elements of it were not maybe taken out before they had given her the serum. Her condition had from that time worsened, and then in late October, her symptoms had grown to lung inflammation and a deep-seated abscess that developed over her ribs on her left side. She died. Despite all of this, Margaret's father continued to be an advocate for Cotton, especially after he found evidence confirming the supposed infection causing her psychosis.
Well, yeah, because he's a well-respected man. He did what he could.
Yeah.
He tried so hard with her.
Super. Well, he tried hard enough.
He did everything.
Uh-huh.
Dumb old white men sitting around, not knowing anything except how to ruin people's lives.
Policing people's bodies.
Yep. Drink.
It's a game where we try to tiptoe through politics. Not all were blindly following in the so-called miracle cure, and some patients had started to notice. Even with their mental illness, they had developed a very big fear of the procedures, because duh. Mm-hmm. And some were violent and fighting staff while still being forced into the operating theater.
Ugh.
At this time, all that was needed for surgery was permission or ignorance from the family members, and due to the hype, no one was intervening. In some cases, Cotton and his staff didn't wait for consent before operating.
That's not okay.
Although his old teacher and mentor, Dr. Myers, was in support of Cotton's claims, he was encouraged by a member of the State Board of Trustees to provide an independent review of the work at Trenton. So Dr. Phyllis Greenacre was commissioned to critique Cotton's work in 1924 after Meyer had expressed concern after a visit to the hospital. Her reports were super critical. She felt as though the hospital was typical for other asylums, basically unwholesome, but it felt as though Cotton was, quote, singularly peculiar. Mm-hmm. She noted that the patients had disturbed her because of their lack of teeth, and making conversation and eating was very hard.
Yeah, and, lack of limbs.
Yeah.
And infections.
Mm-hmm.
And, I don't know, death.
She also noted that the reports within the institution were, quote, chaotic and internally confusing. She was bolstered by these beliefs and was tenacious when she had returned her partial report. Unfortunately, it was buried, and Meyer had reassigned her before she was able to complete it. The only light in that particular part of the story is that Dr. Greenacre became a leader in the psychoanalytic movement in New York. So less surgery, more how can we figure out how to address the symptoms that the patient actually has and go from there. After criticism in 1925 reached the New Jersey Senate, another investigation was launched with testimony from former patients and staff. The trustees had buried it and confirmed their confidence in the practices at the hospital. Although Cotton was under review and suspended, he had went back to work almost immediately and was eventually transferred as a medical director at Charles Hospital in 1930, also in New Jersey. Another report by Emile Frankel in 1932 had determined that the practices at Trenton were harmful and useless, and then those were also suppressed. The surgeries continued at the facility until well after Cotton's sudden heart attack and death in 1933, and it was widely reported as continuing until the 50s or 60s. It wasn't until people had revisited some of his papers that it was also discovered how much he knew about the deaths due to his surgeries. A report written by Cotton had noted that the death toll was around 30%, although it was nearly over 45. Even his own sons, Henry